On the day of my college graduation, my father threw a lavish party, inviting family, old colleagues, and business partners. He raised his glass, praised me for following in his financial footsteps, and smiled like a man who thought he'd won. But what he didn't know was that I had never majored in finance. That day, I stood up in front of everyone, microphone in hand, and gave him something no speechwriter could prepare for. Because for years, he controlled my future. And now, with just one click, I was about to destroy the perfect image he spent decades building. If you've ever been treated like a trophy or a project by your own family, this story might just be the revenge you've been waiting for. Stick around. It gets deeper. Growing up, everything in my house looked like a lifestyle magazine, perfect furniture, wine cellars, framed diplomas. My mother obsessed over appearances, and my father, he was a financial advisor who treated emotions like liabilities. Money wasn't just a tool. It was his language of control. He opened my first bank account and kept my card. He paid tuition, but tracked every purchase. When I got a full ride to college, he still insisted on managing my account, because according to him, free doesn't mean independent. What he really wanted was a clone someone to follow his path, echo his opinions, and inherit his ego. He told everyone I'd become the next big investment analyst. But what he never knew was that I had changed my major in sophomore year and spent the last 2 years secretly building a documentary project about families like mine. And now on graduation day, with all eyes on me, I had a different presentation to unveil, one that didn't end with a diploma, but with a crack in his legacy. I was never allowed to dream on my own terms. When I was 10, I said I wanted to make movies. My father responded, "Only broke people chase cameras." In high school, I joined a film club. He pulled me out and told the school counselor I needed more realistic goals. He pushed math camps and finance seminars instead. To him, creativity was weakness. Structure was success. He didn't hit or scream. He used money and silence. When he was disappointed, he just stopped speaking to me for days. And when he was pleased, he gave bonuses like I was his employee. By the time I got into college, I'd learned how to smile, nod, and lie. I entered under a finance major, but after 1 year of depression and pretending I made the scariest and most freeing decision of my life, I changed my major to film and media studies. I started documenting real stories, especially stories about control. I paid for everything I could through my scholarship and freelance editing. I still let my father think he was funding my finance career. I even sent him fake course schedules and made up grades. At night, while he thought I was studying economics, I was editing footage of people who had escaped controlling families. And as I listened to them, I realized I wasn't alone. But lying wasn't easy. Every call with him was a test. Are you reading The Intelligent Investor? What do your professors think of your market predictions? What's your plan for internship placement next quarter? I became fluent in a language I hated. He thought I was following his plan. But behind the scenes, I was producing a 3-part documentary about how financial control ruins family bonds. And the final segment would be about him. Things got worse when I started dating someone, a fellow media student. When my father found out I was spending time with someone not in finance, He cut my living stipend in half. "You're distracted," he said. "You're losing focus." I didn't fight back. I worked more side gigs. I borrowed gear from the campus lab. I interviewed people in secret and edited between classes. Every time I wanted to quit, I'd watch an old voicemail from him saying, "Without my support, you're nothing." That voicemail became the opening scene of my documentary. The irony. He used to say I was too soft to survive on my own. But it was during those years, starving, hustling, hiding the truth, that I became stronger than I'd ever been. Every boundary he tried to draw, I found a way to cross it. Every rule he enforced, I found a loophole. I even learned how to read legal fine print, because he once tried to make me sign a contract that said he'd own partial credit for my future earnings. I never signed it. I scanned it, filed it, and added it to the documentary. As graduation day approached, I received a message from the film department. My documentary had been selected to screen at an independent film festival in New York. And my father, he was still planning a huge graduation party to celebrate my future in private equity. I wanted to run, to disappear. But then I thought, what if I didn't run? What if I walked into his world, looked him in the eye, and shattered the illusion? Graduation day arrived like a trap, disguised as a celebration. My father had rented out a private room at a luxury hotel downtown. There was a custom cake with a fake stock market graph printed on it, balloons shaped like dollar signs, and even a slideshow of my journey in finance. Most of the photos were of him shaking hands with CEOs, standing next to stock tickers, cutting ribbons at conferences. I stood there in a suit he picked, holding a champagne glass I didn't ask for, while my mother whispered, "Just smile for the guests." He gave a speech. Of course he did. He told everyone I was proof that discipline works, and that I'd be joining his firm within the year. People clapped. Some even nodded in admiration. But then, it was my turn to speak. I walked up to the mic. My hands were cold, but my voice steady. I started with the line he used in every interview. In finance, it's all about control. Then I added, but in life, control without love is just fear in disguise. There was an awkward silence, a few polite laughs. Then I clicked the remote. The projector behind me didn't show stock charts. It showed my documentary. The screen lit up with old home videos, me at 10 years old being pulled away from a school play rehearsal. Clips of our house silent dinners, cold praise contract drafts, voice recordings, bank statements with parental oversight stamps, blurred interviews with others who had survived families just like mine. And finally, his voicemail. "Without my support, you're nothing." Gasps. Confusion. My aunt dropped her fork. My father stood frozen, a forced smile twitching on his lips. I ended the video with this quote: "When you raise a child like a portfolio, don't be surprised when they crash your market." Then I walked off stage. He didn't follow. But someone did. His former intern, Tyler. We'd met briefly before during one of my secret visits back home. He had lasted only a year working under my father before quitting. I remembered how nervous he'd seemed back then. Now he looked different, older, more confident. I saw the film, he said. "You just exposed him without breaking a single law. That takes guts and precision." I was still shaking. "He's going to ruin me." Tyler smiled. "You're already free. He just doesn't know it yet. That night, everything changed. The video was leaked online. Someone at the party had filmed it. Within 48 hours, it had over 100,000 views. Students, activists, even financial abuse survivors started messaging me. I was asked to speak on podcasts, invited to panels, but the real drama started at home. My father tried to spin it. He claimed it was performance art, that he allowed it as a creative surprise. But clients started pulling out. One by one, companies began distancing themselves from his firm. His image, so carefully curated over decades, was unraveling faster than he could grasp, and I didn't have to lift a finger. Everything I showed was real. Every clip, every file mine to use. Because I had spent years gathering receipts not for revenge, but for clarity. Tyler reached out again, this time with something more serious. "I've been working on a project," he said. "A digital platform to protect young people from financial abuse, parental control, spouse manipulation, elder exploitation. I want you to co-create the launch campaign." It was everything I cared about, but it also meant stepping further into the spotlight. Would I become just another headline? The child who exposed her father, or could I turn this pain into a platform? My decision came late one night, after receiving an anonymous email from a student. She wrote, "I was going to drop out this semester because my dad locked my account for dating someone he didn't like. But your film made me realize I'm not crazy. Thank you." That was it. That was the moment. I wasn't just telling my story. I was telling ours. And for the first time, my voice wasn't shaking. It was rising. The fallout wasn't immediate. It was slow, strategic, and brutal, just like the way my father had controlled me all those years. At first, it was silence. No calls. No messages. Then came the letters. Legal-sounding, cold, and carefully worded. His lawyers accused me of defamation, breach of privacy, and emotional sabotage. I remember staring at the letterhead and laughing. He had once used that same firm to silence whistleblowers. Now I was the one he wanted to shut down. But here's what he didn't know. I had every document backed up, legally time-stamped. I had emails proving I was the one managing his cloud storage, that he had given me access voluntarily when I was still his little tech genius. I wasn't afraid of the law. I was afraid of becoming like him. That fear nearly broke me. Every new headline, every message from strangers. "You're so brave." You destroyed him. It felt less like victory, more like pressure. There were days I couldn't breathe. Nights I woke up sweating, checking to see if he had frozen my accounts in retaliation. But he never did. Instead, he did something worse. He called my university. Suddenly there were whispers about honor code violations, questions about whether I had misused university resources for personal propaganda. A professor pulled me aside and said, "There's pressure from above. You might want to lay low." I knew what was happening. This wasn't about clearing his name. It was about isolating me. And it almost worked. Until Tyler called. "Let me guess," he said. "He's playing the long game now." I didn't respond. "Listen," he continued. "I've been there. He made me rewrite reports to cover losses. When I refused, He blackballed me. I couldn't get interviews for a year. I felt a lump in my throat. How did you survive? I built something he couldn't touch. That night, I made my decision. I wouldn't run. I wouldn't fight back with press or lawyers. I'd do what he feared most. I'd exist. Loudly. Authentically. Publicly. With Tyler's help, I launched a campaign called Unparented, a series of short-form videos, testimonials, and resource guides for young people experiencing financial manipulation at home. Within a week, the hashtag #HadUnparented was trending. Stories poured in college students, single moms, retirees, people who had been stripped of autonomy in the name of love. And then, he broke. It started with a leaked internal memo from his firm's senior partners, demanding an internal audit. Then a podcast host released a clip of him walking out, mid-interview, when asked about me. Clients began terminating contracts. And finally, he called me. Blocked number. No caller ID, but the voice. I knew it instantly. Cold. Controlled. Still pretending nothing had changed. "You've made your point," he said. I stayed quiet. "You think this will last. Trends die. People move on. But families, we survive." I took a deep breath. "I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm just telling the truth. If that ruins you, maybe you built yourself on a lie." There was a pause. And then he said the most honest sentence I'd ever heard from him. "I should have never let you learn the system." That was it. No apology. No tears. Just a bitter realization that he'd armed me with the very tools that undid him. When I hung up, I didn't cry. I smiled. Not out of cruelty, but closure. My mother tried to reach out weeks later, sending long, emotional messages. She blamed him. She said she had no idea things were that bad. She wanted to meet for coffee. But I didn't reply, because I had one final thing to do. I sent a secured email to their firm's compliance department. No accusations, no statements. Just a folder of files titled "For Internal Review." I never heard back. But weeks later, his name was quietly removed from the firm's website. He wasn't fired. He was retired early. The whispers about health issues and time for family were just noise. Everyone in the industry knew. He'd lost the one currency he valued most, control. And me, I gained something far more valuable. Freedom. Not just from him, but from the fear that I had to become like him to win. I wasn't interested in winning anymore. I was interested in living. After the storm came the silence. No more calls. No more articles. Just quiet. I moved back into the small apartment Jessica and I had found during the early chaos. The walls were thin. The heater barely worked, and the ceiling creaked with every footstep from the upstairs neighbor. But for the first time it felt like mine. No curated furniture. No marble countertops. No staged perfection. Just life. And with life came reflection. The revenge had worked. The firm had distanced themselves from my father. My mother had gone dark online. Their friends, the ones who used to nod politely at me during family parties, now kept their distance. But instead of feeling triumphant, I felt empty. Not broken. Not guilty. Just done. There was this moment, about 2 weeks after the fallout, where I was sitting on the floor of my bedroom, surrounded by sketches, client work, school assignments, unfinished personal projects. I realized I hadn't drawn anything for myself in months. Everything had been about proving something to them, to the world, maybe even to myself. And that's when it hit me. I was free. But I had no idea what to do with that freedom. So I started small. A morning walk without my phone. A sketchbook filled with nothing but color swatches. Coffee with a stranger who followed my unparented page and wanted to share her story. One step at a time, I built a life that wasn't reactive, but intentional. Then one afternoon, I got an email. A university administrator. Subject line design fellowship opportunity. Urgent review required. I opened it and saw something I couldn't believe. A last-minute scholarship offered by an alumni donor who had seen my work, the anonymous series I'd published, under a pseudonym. It came with a stipend housing allowance and a mentorship with a creative director at a top agency. For the first time in years, I felt a genuine rush of joy. Not revenge, not relief, pure joy. But attached to that email was another offer, a speaking invitation, a national summit on youth empowerment and digital resistance. They wanted me to tell my story, on stage, in front of hundreds of people. I stared at the screen for a long time. The old me, the one that tiptoed around my father's moods, that censored her own voice to avoid judgment, would have deleted the email. But this version of me, this version had nothing to hide. Still, a part of me hesitated. What if telling the story turned into another cycle of conflict? What if he came back louder, more vicious than before? And then I remembered something Tyler once said. Freedom doesn't mean peace. It means power over how you respond to war. So I accepted both. I started the fellowship. I spoke on that stage. I didn't name names. I didn't show receipts. I told the truth not as a weapon, but as a witness. And something shifted. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't afraid. I was awake. That's when I made my final decision. I opened a draft email. No subject line, no introduction. Just 3 attachments. A PDF of every password reset and security notification I had ever triggered. A detailed step-by-step guide for restoring access to their accounts. And finally, a short note that read, "Control is not love. Silence is not protection. I don't owe you my success. I just refuse to build it on your rules." I sent it. No name. No response needed. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was release. From there, life began to fill in the cracks they'd left behind. The fellowship opened doors to international projects, I was invited to collaborate on a mental health initiative for creative students. I even got the chance to design the cover of a book written by one of the people who had messaged me through Unparented. And through it all, I stayed grounded. Therapy helped. Community helped more. And drawing saved me. I started creating again, not to prove, not to impress, but to heal, to rebuild. It wasn't perfect. There were nights I still flinched at certain words, emails I couldn't open without my heart racing, but those moments were fading, slowly, gently, because I had made a choice to stop running, to stop fighting, and to start living. The email was sent. No red receipt. No reply. No retaliation. And honestly, I didn't care. I had no idea what happened on their end, whether they screamed, cried, denied, or even understood what I was trying to say. That wasn't the point anymore, because the real victory wasn't in making them suffer. It was walking away without looking back. I poured my energy into the life I was building brick by brick, sketch by sketch. My days were filled with design critiques, client calls, late-night ramen, and early morning light that streamed across real art, not fake smiles. My scholarship paid for the essentials. My freelance projects covered the extras, and the messages kept coming from students, survivors, even parents who had realized too late the cost of control. People called me brave, but I didn't feel brave. I just felt ready. 1 year later, on my birthday, Jessica surprised me with a tiny celebration in our apartment. There was no fancy cake, no designer candles, just a store-bought chocolate cake, a few friends, and a handwritten card that simply said you didn't just survive them. You outgrew them. That night, as I looked around at the mismatched chairs and cluttered counter and laughter that came from a place of truth, I realized something. This was the first birthday where I didn't flinch when someone said congratulations, because I wasn't being celebrated for who I pretended to be. I was being seen for who I actually was, and that was enough. I didn't need applause. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need their validation. I had freedom. I had peace. And I had me. If you've ever been told your voice is too loud, your dreams too foolish, your path too strange, listen closely. You don't need their permission to become who you are. You just need one thing: the courage to take the first step, even if it means walking alone. At first, if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're building your freedom in silence, just know you're not alone.